really want to give you guys the opportunity to, like Phil, you were saying, not just advocate for careers in science, but really talking about why do you think your studies and what you guys are doing is so important? What do they mean for your neighbors, your grandparents, the public? How would you explain this to somebody that doesn't know much about science or is even skeptical about science and scientists? And then for Sadia and Kalini, why science? What do you want people to know? Why did you do this? And why should somebody want a career as a scientist? So I'm going to throw out first, why are your studies important? What's the significance of this?
Buddy and Kaylani, why don't you try that? I pitch it to you.
Um, I want to say like why this study is important is because, well, we all know that the avian influenza is now spreading around, even though it wasn't like very prominent back like maybe 3, 4 years ago. Maybe that a lot of people didn't know about it, but like knowing now that people are getting more information on it, more like interested in what this virus actually is, it's like this study is important. Like it tells us like what this virus actually is and like what it intends to do to like birds and like what we could do to help others be to stay healthy and to take precautions and to make sure that they aren't like in danger, not in danger, more like they know that they won't be affected by it. Yeah.
Kind of adding on to that, I think this study is really important and science in particular because like for me it kind of gives me like autonomy over my own life. Like for example, if you didn't know about avian influenza, you would just see like egg prices rising and you would see things around you changing, but you wouldn't know why. And I think knowing that why is really important. Um just in terms of being able to live your life with reasoning for things happening around you, which is kind of what I really like. And then I think what the study means for my family, friends, and the public is not to alarm anyone or to put you in a state of panic. I think it's more of just here's what's going on, here's what we know, the precautions, and like, hey, we know it is affecting poultry, and maybe we did find some cases in New York City, but that doesn't mean you should get scared, cause like chaos. It just means like, hey, if you're walking in the park and maybe you see a dead bird, just don't interact with it. Or if you're walking your dog, maybe try to stay away from it. It's really not to put fear, more to just educate and help everyone stay prepared.
Yeah, I would say that the angle is for especially around bird flu, which is what we should be calling it when we're talking to a lay audience. That's what everyone understands it as, is to be honest but not alarmist, to avoid scientific jargon when we're talking. Scientists, we love to be very precise and accurate with everything we say when we're talking to other scientists, and I think that bleeds into our communication with the public in what sometimes can be an unhealthy way. Because if someone doesn't understand what you're saying, then that's not gonna help anybody. The other thing is that when we are talking to a wide public audience, I think that another thing we have to do when we're doing that scientific communication is think about the sort of the dynamics of journalism. So we talk to, normally scientists work with, scientific, publications like JVI, where we're really just, directly publishing our results. So we sort of have very strong control over what is being presented. But when you're working with a regular news organization, like let's say, like just like New York Times or something even, one of their main objectives is to get a lot of attention for their piece. So if you say something that is going to get a lot of attention, then that is what's going to be featured. So you really have to think about what you're saying, and in those moments, think about what is going to get the most attention. Make sure that you're presenting that in an accurate way, but not an alarmist way, in a way that can't be misquoted or misinterpreted intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah, and I also want to add on to this, what I mentioned earlier, and I think we didn't highlight it enough. Actually, we did start this initiative actually in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States and then globally, and it was actually just really interesting, but also also empowering to see what kind of data can we collect now to potentially prevent future pandemics, right? And not only doing it from a top-down view, but just really have a lot of other people that bring in lived experiences also being part of the study design. And that is for me, also one of the main takeaways, if you think about science communication, science outreach, but also how can you be a trusted resource for the people as a scientist, you are not going to run into a crisis by actually not having relationships established before that, right? You want to make sure you have those relationships before a crisis occurs. The crisis is actually not the time to build any kind of relationships. You want to make sure people know your face, because otherwise they might not listen to you. You're actually going to learn their language and then maybe also communicate in different languages and through different channels. And I think that's was just very important. And again, junior researchers like Kalani and Asadia constantly gave us feedback about is this actually, would this communication work for me? What is the highlight of this study, right? Should we get the word out? And then again, messaging quickly, clearly, and also consistent. It's very important. Like Kalani and Sadia, we were coming together before we actually had our symposium where hundreds of people attended, and we actually had talking points. What are the main points that we want to make sure we communicate to everybody asking us about what can I do to keep myself and the city safe in an active bird flu outbreak? So I really have a strong advocate for this kind of community involvement. And the other thing is because this is an ongoing surveillance study, of course, it's also a call for sustained funding to keep initiatives like this ongoing. They are not easy. They're also not trivial. They actually have multiple people working together. We generate data. We publish in open access databases. This is one of the questions in the chat. So we do that. But again, because trust building is involved, and you can't do this from one day to another day, a long-term sustained funding is just really critical now and also in the future.
What I love about you guys' work is beyond the science is it really highlights that anybody can be a scientist, right? Which is really cool. And I think, especially this H5 outbreak, it's so important that, people live in regions, the general public, anybody that lives in an area where bird flu is circulating, or maybe you don't. But again, you find one of these dead birds or a dead animal, not to touch it, to call somebody, because you as a public have a really important part to play in this to help us really understand where this virus is. If you find this dead animal, call somebody, have them come take it, because, those animals can get tested and we can see, did they have bird flu? And that just continues to add to our knowledge about what's happening with this situation. So everybody, I think, has a really critical role to play. And as you've heard from these guys, you can do it. Everybody can be a scientist.